Pastor Julian here with Central's devotion for today. I hope you're doing well. This is a world that is full of temptation. It is overwhelming, and uh, Scripture speaks into that. If you are a Christian, if you truly are a Christian and believe in Jesus, you're not supposed to give in to the desires and temptations of this world like a non-Christian would be. You're not supposed to behave like those other people in the world. You're supposed to look different. You're supposed to act different. You're supposed to be different. And going along with that, I wanted us to take a look at Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 to 19 for our devotion today. This is what it says. Now, this I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. They are darkened in their understanding, alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them, due to their hardness of heart. They have become callous and have given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. Let's take a closer look at this passage. This just you little context. The city of Ephesus is in Greece, and it's a pretty big city. It's the epicenter, really, of all these different temples and worship to gods, and there are various cultures located here. And so here is Paul had been a missionary here, and he has a following. He has a church, and he's writing to them from prison. He says, now I say this, I say and testify in the Lord, that you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. Now, Greece is known for thinkers. This is where the great philosophers are from, and Greek and Roman. So the Apostle Paul is seeing that there is possibly an issue here with the Christians in Ephesus behaving no differently than anyone else there, thinking no differently than anyone else there. And here the Apostle Paul says, you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their minds. Gentiles, obviously, the definition meaning a non-Jew, that isn't what he's speaking to here when he says Gentile, because the people receiving the letter are not necessarily Jewish. So when he's talking about Gentiles here, he's talking about those who are either atheists or are engaged in worshiping ungodliness, gods who are contrary to the one and only God of the world, and especially those who encourage as part of worship sinfulness and ungodliness, according to the God of Israel, the Jesus Christ. So you must no longer walk as the Gentiles do. And he says, in the futility of their minds, in the futility of their minds. Futility meaning that there is a pointlessness, a nothingness in their minds, an emptiness. And he's not talking about an emptiness that they are crafty or intelligent and capable of thinking up incredible things. If you look around our world, there are all sorts of things that people have designed and created and thought of, who aren't necessarily Christian. And we have these incredible minds that God has given us. However, when he says in the futility of the minds, the emptiness, the pointlessness, the nothingness of the minds, he's talking about that their minds and what they think of, regardless of how creative or interesting it might be, is empty because they are not focused on the wisdom of Jesus Christ and the God of the universe, the one and only God. They aren't thinking about godly things and heavenly things, and that being the overarching motivation for their thoughts. So when you don't have God as part of your thoughts and your mind and the center, it's you're dealing with a nothingness, an emptiness. And so he's saying those who do not know Christ, not following Christ, they have an emptiness of their minds. They are darkened, verse 18, in their understanding. They are alienated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to their hardness of heart. They are not understanding. They're ignorant. They just don't know. They don't know. And their hearts are hard toward morality, towards that of godliness, towards Jesus. And so it's like these people, you do not want to think like them and behave like them. Okay? Now, you might remember when you were not a Christian. Now, some of you may have given your life to God from a very young age and lived your life for him. So perhaps you don't remember what it was like really to live as a non-Christian or live as someone who does not have God as their number one priority, that you think about him and he's the king of your life. You might not remember that, but then there's a lot of you who do. There's a lot of us who do. And so we can remember our minds and the way that we operated and how ignorant we were led us to nothingness and emptiness and down the road of temptation and evil, that we got sucked in and led us farther from God, perhaps. But this is saying you don't want to be like that. You don't want to think like that. You don't want to behave like that. And often as Christians, we want to show the world we're not that much different than you. We're not that much different than you. Look what I do. And you can get sucked into this thinking. You can get sucked into this thinking. So then in verse 19, they have become callous and given themselves up to sensuality, greedy to practice every kind of impurity. There is a selfishness associated with who we are and how we think before Christ sits on the throne of our hearts. And that's how it is for those who don't live their lives for Christ, who haven't given their lives for Christ as a Christian. So the Apostle Paul here is telling us, telling the church in Ephesus and telling us as Christians, as a church, that we are not supposed to think like those in the world. We are not supposed to behave like those in the world. We're supposed to live our lives according to God and not fall into these trappings of wanting to fit in and do what the culture is telling us to do. We want to live outside of those expectations and live according to the expectations of God, of Jesus Christ as his followers. So let me encourage you. Don't be concerned about how you fit in the world. Be concerned about how you stand out for Christ in the world. God bless you and have a great day.